Welcome to Threads of Grace podcast with Dr. Suleiman Bamji, where stillness speaks, faith breathes, and every word is woven with purpose. A sanctuary for the soul. Come as you are and leave wrapped in grace. Let each thread remind you, you are held, you are seen, you are loved.
The mystery of goodness. If you were a Polish Jew living in Krakow in 1942, Oskar Schindler's name would be one of the last ones you would want to hear in Poland or anywhere in Europe for that matter, or even the world. You would not have wanted to entrust your life or the lives of your family to him. Schindler was a Nazi profiteer. If Hitler didn't succeed in keeping the war going, then Schindler didn't make money from war contracts. And Schindler liked to make money. He also liked to spend money. Schindler spent millions of dollars keeping Jewish families together and protecting them from Hitler's gas chambers and ovens. At war's end, he had spent everything he had in order to save 1,100 Jews. Why? Why would Schindler spend his entire fortune to save these few Jews from extermination? What did he care if 1,100 Jewish workers were liquidated? There were plenty of others who could make their places in his factory. Money was Schindler's gold and God. And yet, he made a list. The list is life. Itzhak Stern told Schindler in the movie Schindler's List. The list is an absolute good. It was. But where does such goodness come from? People of faith are often asked, if there is a good God, why is there evil and suffering in the world? Sometimes this is asked as a philosophical challenge to Christianity. In that case, another question must be asked in reply. A question for those outside the family of God. If there is no God, why is there goodness in the world? What accounts for an Oskar Schindler? But often the question of God's goodness and human suffering wells up from a suffering soul that cannot see beyond or comprehend its own pain. These dear folks are seeking relief. Our answers, however, will bring little comfort if we do not first understand something about the mystery of goodness. George Orwell observed, most people get a fair amount of fun out of their lives, but on balance, life is suffering, and only the very young or the very foolish imagine otherwise. Obviously, plenty of people are corrupt and corruptible, greedy and deceptive. And there is too much murder, rape, and warfare to go around. If we watch enough news, we'll get the impression that the world is all bad, all the time, all over the place. Like Chicken Little, we'll believe the sky is falling all around us. Global warming, global terrorism, global pandemics, global economic collapse, unceasing warfare, and misery without end. But this is not so. Suffering may be taking place all the time somewhere in the world, but it isn't taking place in each and every place in the world all of the time. Goodness is happening as well. Why? Why, on the whole, is there more goodness in the world than evil? As people of faith, we profess that God made the world good, that we made it bad, and that God will make it good again. Therefore, there is much evil in the world, but there is still much good in the world. In fact, in comparison to evil and suffering, goodness exceeds evil. And when tragedies certainly happen, most of us will spend our entire lives without ever having to endure catastrophic loss of either life or property from a natural disaster. Nor will we be the victim of a violent crime, be persecuted for our faith, be subjected to grinding poverty, or be participants in any number of other grand sufferings that befall humanity. When someone experiences one of these evils, it is one too many. But in truth, comparatively few have to carry that burden. And those who usually experience the goodness of mercy and compassion from those committed to easing suffering. So, is there really only evil in the world? The fact that there is more goodness than evil in the world makes at least two powerful arguments. First, if goodness exists in the world, then goodness must be intentional. And if goodness is intentional, then intelligence must be behind it. Sometimes we see bumper stickers or hear comments referring to practice random acts of kindness. Do you really practice goodness randomly? There's nothing random about being good, which leads to a second truth. If goodness is intentional and comes from an intelligent mind, God's mind, then goodness, not evil and suffering, is normal and natural. Evil is the foul stench of goodness gone rancid. So it stands to reason that goodness has to exist for evil to exist. Philosopher Eleanor Stump wrote on the idea of goodness. If we taste and see the goodness of God, then the vision of our world that we see in the mirror of evil will look different too. Start just with the fact of evil in the world, and the problem of evil presents itself forcefully to you. But start with a view of evil and a deep taste of the goodness of God, and you will know that there must be a morally sufficient reason for God to allow evil. Not some legal and ultimately unsatisfying sort of reason, but a reason in which true goodness is manifest. People are accustomed to say that Job got no answer to his anguished demand to know why God had afflicted him. But they forget that in the end, Job says to God, "Now I see you." Job 42:5. If you could see the loving face of a truly good God, you would have an answer to the question why God had afflicted you. When you see the deep love in the face of the person you suppose had betrayed you, you know you were wrong. Whatever happened was done out of love for you, by a heart that would never betray you, and a mind bent on your good. To answer an unmistakable charge of betrayal, someone who loves you can explain the misunderstanding, or he can show his face. Sometimes showing his face heals the hurt much faster. C.S. Lewis wrote about the same idea in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe when he spoke of a deeper magic. The truth that the mystery of goodness is deeper than the mystery of evil and suffering. The mystery of suffering is deeply profound, but the mystery of goodness is deeper still. Why goodness exists in the world is a formidable challenge for those who doubt that God can be good and powerful and allow suffering to exist. Therefore, those who ask about God's goodness and human suffering need more than a philosophical reply. They need practical answers that bring comfort. A three-sided framework is useful as we respond to others, as well as to assess the questions for ourselves. On one side are three things we should never do when given answers. On another side are three things that we should always do when given answers. And on a third side are three things every sufferer wants in the midst of his or her suffering. What we should never do when given answers. First of all, never give answers to foolish questionnaires. Some questionnaires are not seekers of truth, but are looking to put a fight. They engage in debate for the sake of being argumentative, in an attempt to make the faithful look like fools. We should treat these questioners with kindness and respect, but refuse to engage in a battle of words. This is the teaching of Proverbs 26:4, which advises that we should not answer those who would attempt to reduce us to the level of a fool. Jesus gave similar advice in Matthew 7:6, when he said, "Do not give what is holy to dogs, and do not throw your pearls before swine, for they will trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces." Jesus' warning is specifically against presenting the gospel to those aggressively hostile to it, because they will scorn the truth and attack the presenter. On the other hand, Proverbs 26:5 recommends that we help a fool recognize his or her folly. If possible, answer a fool in simple terms, so he doesn't get a swelled head, in Message translation. It takes wisdom to know when to answer and when to keep silent. In general, however, the rule is worth following. Never wallow with a hog. You will both get muddy, but a hog loves it. Second, never give answers to questions that are beyond your knowledge. When it comes to providing answers to the questions of evil and suffering, you either have something to say or you don't. And if you don't, then keep quiet. It is simply true that we cannot know what we don't know, and we cannot answer what we don't understand. Saying, "I don't know," requires humility. Humans are questioning creatures, but we are also answering creatures who don't always know how to admit ignorance. When we truly do not know the answer to a question, however, we must swallow our pride and offer a humble, "I don't know." Let us approach the subject of suffering with a little humility. Answers are not easily come by. We must recognize that human answers will never fully satisfy every human question and questioner, and some questions are beyond human answers. The reality is, oceans of ink have flowed in search of answers to evil and suffering, but no human mind has ever figured it all out. The essential mystery remains and always will. If there had to be a simple answer, it would have been found out by now. Whatever answers we each believe to be true will still face further questions that they do not answer completely. It may be that we will never have answers to our questions, because we couldn't understand the answers given, even if we heard them. This becomes an act of grace. Give a little grace to those who ask about God and suffering. If you don't have an answer, hold your tongue. Thirdly, never give answers to questions without love. When Job's 3 friends sat down next to him on his ash heap, they came with their self-righteousness well hidden. But when they opened their mouths, all doubt about their agenda was dispelled. Their intentions were to set their friend straight, to confront him about his sin, and to motivate him to repent. But they got everything wrong. They misdiagnosed Job's problems. His calamity wasn't due to a personal hidden sin. They misunderstood God's sovereignty, and that he couldn't be bought off with corrupted self-righteousness. And they mistook their own theological insight. They didn't know what they were talking about. Their answers didn't relieve the suffering of their friend. Instead, their answers inflicted additional pain on his already tortured soul. If we aren't careful, we can become like Job's friends, wounded with callous words and calling it love. What we should always do when given answers. Number 1, always answer questions with a balance of heart and head. When confronted with painful realities and difficult questions, it is tempted to answer with our heart and not our heads. This is especially true in the face of death. We always and often wind up saying things to sufferers which are silly and false, like God needed another angel. But no matter how pleasant it sounds, it's simply not true. We don't turn into angels when we die, and God certainly doesn't need another one. Our hearts ensure answers that are loving and sensitive, but our heads ensure answers that are truthful and Christ-honoring. That is the beauty of balance. Number 2, always give answers that are truthful, even if painful. This doesn't give us license to be Job's friends, who were both insensitive and wrong. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, wrote, "Speak the truth as you see it, but with kindness, with humility, without hypocrisy." Even better, heed Paul's admonition to speak the truth in love. Ephesians 4, verse 15. The things all sufferers want immediately are answers to their questions. But answers are not always immediately available. Sufferers don't like to hear that. But they must hear it because they cannot live on false hope. Sometimes answers are revealed and sometimes they're not. The question is, can you trust God even if you never know why you suffer? Number 3, always give answers that point to the gospel. When people suffer, we often point them to the book of Job, hoping that they and ourselves will find answers there. But the book of Job says more about the mysterious sovereignty of God than it does about the meaning of suffering. If we look to Job for the answer to the question of suffering, we must be prepared to discover that the answer is not a why or wherefore, but a who. And those who suffer not only discover the who through the fullness and richness of the gospel. Only the cross, the resurrection, and the hope of life anew will fully satisfy the longing and lonely heart. What sufferers want in the midst of their suffering? Sufferers want a silent friend. If we could be transported back into the world of Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, we would think that we stepped into a monastery, but not to Kierkegaard. His world was just as noisy as ours. He mused, "In view of the present situation of the world, one might Christianly say it is a sickness. And if I was physician, I would prescribe silence. Silence itself is eloquent sympathy." Os Guinness wrote, "We who use too many words should learn some eloquence. Through it, sufferers might hear God." Sufferers want a listening ear. When sufferers ask questions, they aren't always looking for answers. They simply want to release the pressure that suffering brings. It takes discernment and sensitivity to know when to speak and when to remain quiet. But when in doubt, be slow to speak and quick to listen. James 1:19. Simone Weil wrote, "To listen to someone is to put oneself in his place while he is speaking." We'll continue. To put oneself in the place of suffering whose soul is corroded by affliction or in near danger of it is to annihilate oneself. It is more difficult than suicide would be for a happy child. Therefore, the afflicted are not listened to. They are like someone whose tongue has been cut out and who occasionally forgets the fact. When they move their lips, no ear perceives any sound, and they themselves soon sink into incompetence in the use of language because of the certainty of not being heard. Talking is easy, listening is hard. But listening is one thing you must do when you encounter a soul who is suffering. Listen not to respond, but to understand. Sufferers want a reassuring touch. Great care must be taken when touching. It must be appropriate, gentle, and invited. But great ministry can take place with a simple touch. It offers security, sympathy, and intimacy. In the words of Tennessee Williams, devils can be driven out of the heart by the touch of a hand on hand. Oscar Sinnott saved 1,100 Jews in 1945, as well as whole generations born from them. And yet, some saw Schindler as an evil man because he was a Nazi, worthy of being branded a war criminal. Others, though, saw Schindler as a savior, a man of deep goodness. So it is with our God. Many are conflicted about the goodness of God and the state of the world. Some are contemptuous of God because they look out on the world and see only suffering. Others are consumed with life's pain and seek only comfort. But we, as people of faith, look and see the profound mystery of goodness of our God, even in this world of suffering. So what do we say to those who aren't able to see what we see? Answers are not always easy to come by. But whatever answers we give, we must point people to the deeper mystery of goodness in the world, the goodness of the gospel. We must point them to this essential truth. God's answer to suffering is not a philosophy, but a person. Not something, but someone. Not a word, but the word itself. Not a myth, but the Messiah. Not commentary, but the cross. Not human reason, but divine resurrection. God's answer is Jesus Christ. This is the mystery of goodness.
Subscribe to the Threads of Grace podcast, where testimonies transform lives. Subscribe, like, share, comment.